welcome back to my channel. So today's video is one that has been very highly requested. This is like in the top 3 of the most highly requested videos I make other than John Benet Ramsey. So I know this one's been really long awaited. And this one is also one that I've not necessarily been avoiding by any stretch of the imagination. It just brings up a lot of emotions for me. See, I'm like already like trying to cry here, like get it together. It brings up a lot of emotions for me, so forewarning, I might get upset and emotional at a few times of this video because I've got some personal experiences I want to share that can relate a lot to this and might help you guys understand. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. So today's video is on the disappearance of Macin Smith. Now, Macin was 17 years old when he disappeared from his home in St. George, Utah on September 1st, 2015. He had recently moved to this home from Canada. I guess his dad moved a lot for work, so moving itself wasn't very unfamiliar to him, but this was, I'm pretty sure, a pretty large move. And for the first 6 or so months that they were living in St. George, Utah, it was just Macin and his mom, Tracy. His dad was up north, I think in Salt Lake City, doing some work, and that was no problem for him because he'd always been a mama's boy. You know, communication wasn't always the best, his mom did admit, but they got along really, really well. She loved her little boy. He was the youngest of 6 children, and it was the last one in the home, so I'm sure she was just soaking all of it up. Now, Macin had gone through quite a few struggles while he was living in Canada. He developed a speech impediment very, very young, and despite going to therapy and doing a couple things to try to resolve it, there was still just a little bit of it left behind. And while most people couldn't really pick up on it, we all know how young kids are, and he ended up being bullied pretty badly for it in middle school. Badly enough to the point where he ended up suffering from depression. Now, Macin was also very, very reserved. He had social anxiety. He preferred to be by himself. He was not the type of person to sit down with you and tell you his problems. You had to like come and pry it out of him, or he had to be desperate. And again, since these kids were making fun of him, he was sent into the spiral of depression, which in turn led him to suicidal thoughts to the point where he had to finally come to his mom and ask for help. And again, that was not the kind of person he was. He didn't just willingly come forward and do this. So it meant that it was really a huge struggle of his. Because of this, he was hospitalized, treated, I'm not sure in what exact ways, and everyone tried to pretty much move on from this. So Macin wasn't really sure about the move to Utah. Again, he was very reserved, so the few friends that he did have back in Canada, he was pretty close with. And imagine how scary it would be as someone with social anxiety, and I have social anxiety, so I get it, to move to a place your senior year of high school. You know, you've already struggled through making decent friends the rest of your life, and then the 1 year before your life really does change, when you go to college and become a full adult, you know, you have to kind of start all over again. And he was really concerned about that, and so were his parents. But the move seemed to be really good for him. You know, beautiful weather, beautiful scenery everywhere. He was just soaking it up. He liked to be outside and go sightseeing with his mom, and he was enjoying being in somewhere new. It felt like a fresh start, you know, despite the fact that some of his credits didn't transfer over to the United States and he had to be put in summer school. He was trucking through, and despite his previous battle with depression and all these other things he really seemed to be struggling with, it seemed to be the happiest he had been in a very long time. That is until his dad came home and finally moved in with him and his mom. I think it was only a week and a half maybe into his first week of his senior year. Things slowly started to go downhill. As a mother and as a mother to a son, and kind of seeing the difference between how you tend to treat your sons versus your daughters, at least for me, and As someone who was really close to my mom and had a very strict dad, I feel like my family life was kind of set up very similarly to Mason's and his parents. And I feel like his mom was a little bit more lenient. So what he did a lot to, I guess, just escape from some of the issues that he was having, and what he did instead of going and hanging out with friends and, you know, going outside and being social, was watching YouTube videos, watching anime, playing music, playing video games. And his mom just kind of let him do that because that was his happy place. Obviously, to a healthy extent, but she had a little bit of leeway, whereas his dad, Darren, didn't really seem to have the same outlook on things, at least from what I have seen. Again, I'm not a part of his family, so I'm not sure, but it seemed like his dad came home and kind of just like threw a wrench into the good thing they had going. He was able to spend more of his free time doing the things he wanted, but his dad was not all about that. So on August 31st, 2015, Macin started heading home from school, and he texted his mom and he was ecstatic. He said, "I'm getting all A's. You know, here we go. We are only about 2 weeks into the school year and I'm doing it. Like, I'm doing great." And he was excited about this because they had reached an agreement. His love for anime, especially, was starting to cause some problems. And it wasn't anything extreme. He would just be up late at night. Instead of studying, he would want to do his anime. It was just very small things. So his parents told him as long as he got all A's and B's, he was allowed to watch his anime, play his video games, do all of that during the school week. So he was expecting to go home and be able to just veg out and chill to some anime. But his dad had other plans. Now, like we said, his dad was really strict from what I've seen and wanted him to do, and not necessarily in a bad way, but just wanted him to succeed, wanted him to go out and get friends. He wanted him to go get his license. He wanted him to join activities, school activities, youth group, do all these things. And as someone with social anxiety, he was not really up for that. So his dad planned that day to take him out to go practice driving, because one of the things they really wanted him to do was be more independent in a sense of driving himself to school, being able to drive and run errands. But Macin was scared of driving. He told his mom he was scared of getting in a car accident. He wasn't confident enough, and it made him incredibly uncomfortable. So when his dad approached him, asking him to do something that made him uncomfortable when he thought he was going to have this opportunity to watch anime, he ended up telling his dad that he had a headache, and they rescheduled it. So the night just kind of went on as usual from there. He chilled in his room exactly like he had planned to and watched some anime. Now around 8:30, Tracy, his mom, came home and realized that he was in his room, and this was not really like him. He never went to bed that early, his lights were off, and so she knocked on the door and went in and realized he was already in bed and everything. And she asked him, you know, "Are you okay?" And he just said, "I don't feel good. I'm fine, I just don't feel good," chalked it up to pretty much nothing. So she sat with him for a minute, kissed him on the forehead, and then said, "I hope you feel better, have a good night," and she went off to bed. Now, she had a discussion with her husband after she put him to bed and said, "This is super strange, she doesn't normally act like this," but her husband said, "No, he said he had a headache earlier. I'm pretty sure it was just to get out of going driving. He wanted to watch his anime instead." So, being the parents that they were, they did something that they did every single night, which was unplug the modem to the internet, and they usually hid the cable. They had a strict rule that at 10 p.m. all electronics were done. No more internet, no nothing. You could read, you could study, or you could go to bed. Now, he a few times had gone and plugged the modem back in and been found in the middle of the night, I think even to 2 or 3 a.m. watching anime. And playing video games. And so this time she unplugged it, but she didn't hide it because she was too tired and they just went to bed. Sometime between 1 and 2 a.m., her husband wakes up to a noise, and he wakes his wife up and is like, "I'm telling you, Macin's in there on his laptop. I'm gonna go check." So he walked in, and sure enough, he saw a blue light coming from Macin's door, and when he opened it, Macin was watching anime. Now, it was, again, against their rules. He had just earned the right back to watch this, so as parents do, Darren confiscated his laptop and his phone and said, "You need to go to sleep tonight. You can't be doing this in the middle of the night." And there wasn't an argument or anything. Macin didn't really seem extremely upset. So Darren said goodnight to his son, took all of the items back into the room, and even joked with his wife a little bit. And he was like, I told you he was gonna do that. And they just kind of went back to sleep. Now, 7 a.m. was usually the time they went to wake Macin up for school in the morning. They slept in a little bit later. I'm guessing their jobs didn't have to be there as early. So one of them would go make sure Macin was awake, and they would listen to just make sure, again, he was doing the things he was supposed to. So they heard him wake up, get himself ready. I think it was about 7:30. They heard him down in the kitchen getting himself breakfast. His bus came somewhere between 7:40 and 7:45, and sure enough, like clockwork, a little bit before 7:40, they heard the garage door open and shut, which to them said he left for school. But neither one of them saw him actually leave or saw him at all that morning, which isn't very abnormal. Like I said before, they slept in a little bit later. So they just simply expected him to be going to school. His bus stop was only about 2 blocks away. He could easily walk to it, go to school, everything was fine. So both of his parents that day went on like nothing was going on. His dad, I think, was just home for the day doing yard work. He was waiting for Macin to come home because Macin was supposed to pick up on that driving lesson that he had ditched out on the day before. So 3 o'clock comes, nothing. 3:30 comes, nothing. 4 o'clock comes, and he realizes Macin had never gotten off the bus. So he calls his wife just to let her know. Now, Stacy also isn't very alarmed at first. They figured he was just mad that he had his things taken away the night before and was blowing off steam. That is until she ended up getting an email from the school saying that Macin never even went to classes that day. She decided to go ahead and leave home early. They checked the church they went to. There was a youth group meeting on Tuesday nights, and just trying to see if maybe he went to that, maybe if he hung out with some kids in the neighborhood, but he never showed up. So then they really started to panic, and they made a deal with each other that they were going to wait until his curfew, which was 10 o'clock at night, to see if he came home. You know, maybe he was just incredibly angry and just really needed some time away and apart to gather himself. And then he never showed up by his curfew, so they immediately called police. Now, the first officer that came was incredibly kind, and he was like, all right, you know what? I will go around and look for Macin. I'm just gonna be driving around all night anyways, so I'll keep an eye out for him. And I didn't state this before, but Macin was 6'4" and 200 pounds. Y'all, he was a tall, lanky kid. He had blonde hair, like the brightest blue eyes. You could not miss him anywhere. He was incredibly tall. This comforted his parents a little bit, but unfortunately the next morning the officer didn't see anything. At this point, again, even the police department is considering him a runaway. He was angry at his parents. It all kind of fit together. And he had actually run away once before in Canada. It was almost exactly a similar situation. One night, his parents woke up, found him late, I think it was 1 in the morning, on his laptop. So as punishment, they took his laptop and his Xbox away, except that time, he got mad and he was yelling, he was angry, and shortly after the confrontation, the front door slammed. They filed a missing persons report. It was, I think, 12 or something below zero that night. It was way too cold, and he braved it for as long as he did, and he had actually even left prepared. He had taken a sleeping bag with him, food, all sorts of things that he would need, but it was just too cold and he came home. So they kind of figured the same situation was gonna happen now. You know, it wasn't cold this time, it was still summer, so they thought he's just angry and he can stay outside, so it'll take him longer to come back. So his mom went about her schedule, went and paid for his graduation cap and gown. I mean, everything seemed normal. Everyone, his family even, assumed he would just be coming home soon. But that never happened. They realized that his daughter's room was locked, which was not like him, especially if he wasn't actually in his room. So they had to break in. They saw a few very strange things going on. They thought he went to school, but they actually found all of his binders and books and everything, not in his book bag, I don't think, but just stuffed under a pile of clothes in his closet. They also found his wallet tucked somewhere deep in one of his nightstands. Basically, all of his other important belongings and anything linked to him were hidden. and his door was locked, almost as if he was trying to delay them finding anything or knowing that he never actually planned on going to school. His wallet had his ID in it, all of his cash in it, everything in it, so he literally took nothing but the clothes he was wearing and left that day. This is when they got a little bit more alarmed and worried that he didn't really plan on coming back or something horrible had happened. So she called the bus driver that drove his school bus. No one had seen him that day. She took his phone and started texting all the last people he had spoken to. No one had heard from him. Keep in mind, they had no way to contact him because the night before, his phone had been taken, his laptop had been taken. They had confiscated all of his electronics. They tried to find his passwords to things, and even with that, they found very little on his laptop, and his search history had been deleted up until 12:30 a.m., technically early morning when he went missing. Police decided to take all of his different devices and go through them as well. And they expected to find something, you know, maybe him searching for a way to run away and do this, or how do I do this? Where can I go for this? But there was literally not a single thing. He literally just used all of his devices to watch anime, watch YouTube. You know, it was never really a form of communication with other people. They thought maybe he would text other people about what he wanted to do, message people through Facebook, but they couldn't find a single thing. They didn't have much to go on, so they started putting together some search efforts. And then finally a tip came in that seemed like a huge break. A couple people called into the tip line saying they saw Macin at an area that was about 5 miles away from his home, and they said he was standing on the side of the road with a sign that said that he needed a ride to Vegas. Now, at the same time this was happening, an actual tip came in from Vegas saying that they saw someone that looked like Macin. So obviously, if you're an officer, even if I heard that information, I would be like, oh, well, that is our answer. He has run away to Vegas.
Crews hit the streets again tonight searching for a missing Utah teenager who may be here in our valley. 17-year-old Macin Smith went missing more than a week ago from St. George, Utah. Members of Macin's family think he could be somewhere along I-15 between Salt Lake City and Las Vegas. St. George police have received tips that Smith was seen holding a sign reading "Hitchhiking to Vegas" the day he went missing. Red Rock Search and Rescue has deployed several missions looking for him.
Macin, if you're watching this, one, you're not in trouble, okay? We're here to help you. Your family's not mad at you. They miss you. They want you to come home.
So they pulled all the security footage of the surrounding gas stations in the area where he was seen in actual St. George. Unfortunately, their hopes were crushed because this was another young man and it wasn't actually Macin. His father had even gone out to Las Vegas. The Red Rock Search and Rescue team had actually started a search in Vegas. They were so convinced he was there that everyone just dropped everything and chased this lead, and unfortunately it led just to a dead end. They interviewed teachers, friends, people he went to church with, anyone he knew, people that were in Canada, just trying to see if anyone had any idea where he went, what he might have done, and again, nothing. They looked at homeless shelters, they searched the streets, they went to a psychic medium, and no more was found until something huge was found on the 7th of September in his wallet. Now, when they first went through his wallet, they didn't really find anything. They didn't expect anything of importance to be in there, honestly. And then they found a piece of paper, well, 3 pieces of paper that had been folded up like teeny tiny and hidden in a part of his wallet. So it would have taken a lot of searching and effort to find it, and this letter destroyed his family. The letter was handwritten from Macin himself, and it was, I think, 2 or 3 pages long. His family said it was so intense and personal that they will not release what was in it, which is 100% understandable. That's not anyone else's business. I've seen a few people angry online that they won't release it, and they're trying to say it's for like their own benefit. I think that's sick. If he poured his heart out into this letter, as police themselves have even confirmed, it's no one else's business. You know, he couldn't handle his emotions. He was having a hard time with that. He was trusting his family only after running away with his emotions. To put that out to the entire world would be incredibly disrespectful to him. but we do have little clues to go by. There's one phrase from the letter that his mother has released, and it was 2 words, and all it was "I'm done." Now, his mother says that in the first 2 sentences, she knew what the letter was, and it was a letter of intent. The letter, according to his mother, basically was his way of saying he was going to go and hurt himself. It was his version of a suicide note, I guess you could say. Again, I don't want to say that for a fact because I have not read it, obviously. But I don't know how exactly direct it was. I don't know if it was just the assumption off of the phrase "I'm done." But that has to be absolutely devastating to read. And I'm assuming as well from what one of the detectives has said or one of the officers involved that it was written after he had his things taken. Apparently in the letter he talked a lot about having his electronics taken away and how it angered him, and you know, some anger that he had towards his parents. But most of the letter, like the absolute bulk of the letter, was his own internal struggles. That he felt like he wasn't a good person, and just a bunch of things, I'm guessing, just revolving around his depression and things he was emotionally going through and unable to cope with. At this point, this is all the police have to go on. This is the only one piece of solid evidence that would lead them in a direction of what happened to him, and unfortunately it led them into the direction of possible suicide. He had in fact admitted to suicidal thoughts and possible actions before. He had been hospitalized for it. This was not anything unfamiliar to him or his family. This is when they started essentially searching for a body. Red Rock Search and Rescue came out and searched an enormous amount of land. They had volunteers come out, relatives, friends of the family, just people who lived in the neighborhood.
We have about 10 members on our team right now officially with horses, but we have another group that's meeting us as well in the search area. So we'll probably have about 16 out.
Those horses, at least half a dozen cadaver dogs, crews on ATVs and foot will all be combing the rugged terrain of a 48 square mile area outside the city.
Now, the investigating detective did say that usually when someone leaves their home to commit suicide, they are found within a mile. So they went above and beyond. They went past that. They had dogs. They had, at one point, helicopters, I think, but they couldn't find Macin. That's when his mom remembered a conversation that she had with him at one point, and she just saw it as like this harmless conversation and didn't really know what to make of it at first, so she went along with it. But it's very interesting, and this kind of changed my whole thought process on this case. They lived in Canada, I'm pretty sure, for most of his life, but his parents met in California. They took trips there all the time, and he told his mom one time that, you know, he wished he could just kind of run away from it all. And he wanted to run away somewhere in specific. He said he would run away to California. And, you know, he even had it almost like planned. Like, he went very in depth into what he would do. And she says she specifically remembers this because she said, as a joke, because she was just going along with it, thinking he was just like talking in a sense of like, oh yeah, I wish I could just like, you know, drop all this life too and go do something fun instead. But then she said, well, at least tell me when you do it, in a joking manner. And his response to her was, I probably wouldn't. And this started really sticking out in her mind. She strongly started believing he was out there somewhere, and that's when a family friend of hers came forward and said they had the exact same conversation with Macin. They were on vacation one year and he said the same things, and she said she will never forget it because he was so specific. I mean, it's like he had researched exactly what to do, exactly how to get there, exactly where to go. He wanted to go to California. He wanted to be a beach bum, according to him, and just hang out by the ocean and do his own thing and be a free spirit and not be, you know, held down by anyone else or their rules. So at this point, when they talked about their different conversations with him, he had essentially, from point A to point B, every possible scenario, planned how to run away successfully and have nobody find him. And he even told his mom that he wouldn't tell her that he would just run away to escape from it all. And this is where I'm going to get into something kind of personal. I'm already crying again. Lord, this is not going to be easy for me. But I feel like I need to do this. So in my last missing persons video, we talked about Rennie. And a lot of people said, you have to be heartless to run away and not tell your family, to leave them hurting behind. And a lot of people said that. They're like, that's not a possibility. No one would just run away from their family and let all those people suffer. Like, you have to be selfish, you have to be heartless. And while I know that you guys didn't mean that in a bad way, I feel like I have to tell a story. And it's gonna make me emotional, and it's not the most fun thing to talk about. In my channel, I try to share my own experiences, if I can, and really humanize these people and maybe shed more light onto their reasons for doing something. Just open up your mind to other possibilities. I developed severe postpartum depression after I gave birth to my son Liam, and it was intense, to say the least. And I had a day where I almost did exactly what Macin might have done, where something really stupid, and I'm gonna tell you kind of what it was. I'm not gonna go into detail. Basically, my like escape was walking around Target to like distract my mind, because we lived in the middle of nowhere. So I spent 6 days out of the week just like sitting at home and not getting any human interaction. I wanted to go to Target on Powell's one day off of work. And long story short, we drove like the 45 minutes to get there, and something like super stupid and silly happened, and we had to go home. And it triggered something very intense in me. And I know a lot of people are looking at him and the fact that he had these things taken away from him, and they're thinking there's no way someone would, you know, be so heartless to run away from their family because of that. But it triggered my postpartum depression like nothing else had. And I will never forget laying in bed. Literally, I was laying in bed for hours with my newborn son in the other room, my daughter and my husband, and I was going to walk out the back door and just leave. And I was going to just walk. I didn't know where I wanted to go. It didn't matter. I didn't want to be there anymore. I felt like my mental problems were burdening the people I cared about the most, because they had to witness me freak out. They had to deal with all the weird things like going to Target that I needed to do in order to cope with my mental illness. And you guys, I told my husband to his face I was walking out the back door, and I was walking and I was leaving, and he kept asking, well, where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna go? It doesn't matter when you're in that state of mind. If he was repressing depression because he didn't want to disappoint his family, or maybe he didn't want to face it himself because of how scary it was the first time having those feelings. If you've never experienced that feeling before, you will not understand it. You won't. I don't care what kind of education you have, you won't understand it. Having suicidal thoughts is the scariest thing I've ever been through my life. It's not happened since. I had postpartum depression, like I am healthy in my state of mind. But there is nothing in life anymore that scares me as much as that day, and how I felt and feeling out of control and knowing that's not who I was. And I can 100% see someone walking away from their entire life because I almost did it. I almost walked away from my newborn, my husband, and my daughter. I am not a heartless person, you guys. I am not all these things that you guys said about Rennie, and I feel like it's just being naive and not experiencing things the same way other people do, but it happens. And I have a strong feeling that in this case that could possibly be what happened, and I don't want people to dismiss it because it sounds so silly to some people, because I've seen people making fun of him on forums. Oh, he ran away because of anime. You don't know what was going on in his brain. You have no idea. And unless you've felt some of the similar feelings that he might have been feeling, you have no idea please be open-minded. You know, he could have been out there somewhere, and I don't care if it seems like it's stupid to run away because of the reasons he might have run away for. He wasn't heartless. Someone who is suffering from mental illness and decides to run away, and despite possibly seeing their family in shambles because of it, they might think they're doing the right thing. If he ran away, he might think he's doing the right thing. He might think he's not a burden to anyone anymore. You know, he spent his whole life being babied by his siblings that loved him, and his family had to struggle with his speech impediment, with the fact that he ended up with depression. You know, he was trying to be something, but he was being held back by social anxiety and depression, and he might have just felt like he would never amount to what his family would want him to, and he might have left because of that. It might have been the last straw to disappoint his dad just days after he came home. He might have just been done, like he said, and walked off. Does that mean suicide necessarily? I don't think so. Just go at it with an open mind. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, goodness gracious, another tip came in that gave them a bit of hope. A woman was taking her daughter to dance lessons on the day that he went missing, around, I think it was like 3 p.m. And she says that after she dropped her daughter off, she was driving away and she saw Macin walking on the road away from his house. Now, she knew it was him because she went to the same church and they had had a couple of conversations. So this means it is very, very possible that Macin tried to come home around the time that school got out. Maybe he just didn't want to go to school that day. He needed to stop and focus on things throughout the day, and then would come home when school was supposed to be over, so it didn't look strange and it looked like he went. And then maybe something stopped him and he decided to leave again. I don't know if this tip was 100% confirmed. I don't think any of the sightings so far have been confirmed, but this woman knew him and 100% recognized him in his neighborhood the day he went missing. So I would bet everything on the fact that she really did see Macin that day. Macin's family and friends were doing absolutely everything to find him. A total of 14 searches were done by Red Rock Search and Rescue. There was a huge Facebook page, and there still is a massive Facebook page. And there are so many people on there. They've got so much great information. They've got maps of where was searched, what you should do. They've got printouts. They've got, you know, stickers, all sorts of things to help hopefully benefit his search. They have fast facts about him. You know, they're really on top of their game, trying to spread awareness and bring him home, and they have a ton of people following his story. There was an organization that fed the homeless and at the same time looked for missing persons, and they decided to print all of his information on some of the snacks they handed out, and they handed that all out to people in, I think, Salt Lake City, and they did it again in Las Vegas. Then their largest hope was maybe he would come home on his 18th birthday. As we said, he seemed to be struggling with the authority of his parents. He did not like it. So they thought, you know, when he turns 18, he is a legal adult. Maybe he'll realize he can come home because he'll feel like he can do what he wants. They had a cake for him, you guys. They had balloons. They had everything, but Macin never showed up. They put up a $10K reward, and while tips still came in, not a single thing led them to any sort of information on Macin. There was even another tip from 2 girls that seemed really, really hopeful. They saw him in Salt Lake City at a Panda Express. They gave him money. They even knew down to the speech impediment. But literally just a couple of days ago, they were able to rule out that it was not Macin. So now we're going to get into the theories, because there is no more information on this case. Everyone, including the police department, is still actively trying to figure out what happened to him. So that leads us to the theory that he ran off. And there's actually like a couple theories within this theory. One theory that seems to be pretty relevant on his Facebook, especially lately, and on a lot of the forums that I read, was that, like his mother said, he's in California, but there are apparently a lot of homeless camps in California and in other places on the West Coast. I guess it's like tents upon tents upon tents. I'm sure a lot of you will be able to tell me more about this, but it's basically just big campsites filled with a dozen to dozens of homeless people. While I do find it likely he did say he wanted to go to California, there are a few things that this would kind of require. He had to travel all the way to California somehow, meaning whenever he left his home, because his home is literally, like all of St. George is just surrounded in desert, he would have had to beg for money somewhere. He didn't take any money with him. So that means someone would have had to have given him money and would remember him. He couldn't have easily walked to another town, but since it would have to probably be someone living there, no one's come forward. Every single person in that town knows about Macin. If he took a bus out to California or out to somewhere other than St. George, he probably would have had to go to an actual bus station, not just like an in-city transit, which means possible video footage. I'm 100% sure at this point that police thought of that and have checked it. So that means that his two most likely options of leaving St. George because of the terrain and the way everything is set up aren't incredibly likely. Then there's the other possibility of hitchhiking. That being said, hitchhiking's not very popular like it used to be because of the dangers, so I'm sure if someone did pick up a hitchhiker, especially a 6'4" one who was only 17 years old, they would remember it. Now, if they were driving through St. George, they are right beside a border, maybe they were just traveling between states, it's very possible that this person just doesn't know Macin, has never seen his face. There's no way you wouldn't remember him. They would have been in the car with him for at least some period of time, you know what I'm saying? Like, there had to have been some conversation there. Granted, Macin was very, very shy, but to me, that would almost make him stick out more in my mind. It'd be like, I picked up this kid and he like won't talk to me at all. Then it comes to him actually going to one of these camps. He was incredibly shy. As we said, he had a lot of social anxiety. These camps are like tight-knit communities of homeless people. I just don't really see him putting himself in a position where he walks into one of these camps and like asks to be one of them. That would require a lot of social interaction, a lot of kind of confidence and courage, which seems to be something that he didn't really have a lot of. However, if he was desperate, you can't really rule it out. So I don't think that's something that should be ruled out completely. So then on the flip side, if he did manage to somehow get to one of these campsites in possibly California, the area that he said he wanted to go to, that means, like I said before, a dozen to dozens of people are possibly living with him. And knowing him, he's probably seen as the really shy guy. So I hope someone in the area goes to some of these campsites, maybe puts up posters. You don't have to talk to any of these homeless people if it makes you uncomfortable, but just put posters out there if you can, because he might be living there and they just don't know. Keep in mind, homeless people do not have access to constant social media, and that's been where his biggest presence is. I think these are things that should not be ruled out, and all it would take to solve it would be exposure. If he was in the homeless population nearby, I feel like he would have been found. His missing posters are literally handed out everywhere. If you go to his missing persons page, there are people in St. George and surrounding areas that just go up to the homeless population and ask. They pass out flyers, you know, there have been so many different sightings. His picture's everywhere. I feel like he has gone further than that if he has run away. It's just how and who helped him. So then it comes to our next he ran away theory, which is he ran away and he's just off by himself, which to me sounds a lot more like Macin. But this would be the most difficult out of all of the options. If he was struggling emotionally and he just wanted to run off and be alone so he wasn't a burden to anybody else, the chances that he would immediately run to another social population of homeless people just doesn't seem very likely to me. But it would be so incredibly difficult as a homeless person on your own, especially at his age. And keep in mind, he was not familiar with this area. He just moved from Canada. So how would he have known where to go? I feel like if he was by himself, the chances of him getting out of the St. George area would be slim to none. And in that case, someone at this point would have recognized him. I don't know. I don't know what to think about it. He also already had planned, apparently, to 2 other people and had been thinking about it for a long time that he did want to run away off on his own, but it would have required a lot of planning. This immediately makes me think of the fact that his history from 12:30 a.m. to when his laptop was taken was deleted. That means he was hiding something. I want to know what he was doing in that time frame. Like, why was that deleted? Was he looking up places to go? Was he figuring out last minute details to a plan of wanting to run away? But the whole entire idea behind his disappearance is that he was triggered into disappearing from having his things taken away, you know? So that would totally negate that, because that happened after the fact. If he was spending that time planning, he had been kind of funky all day that day. to his mom, to his dad. Had he already been planning something and that just is something that happened along the way and they're putting a little bit too much into that? Or maybe he was trying to plan for something and that just kind of sealed the deal afterwards and all the plans he had been looking at went through. I just wish we could know what was on that laptop and what he was searching for that last bit of period that he deleted. Something else that's holding me back is the fact that he's run away before, and when he ran away before, he took things with him. He had a plan, he was angry. This time, he didn't take anything. And at first, I kind of thought, okay, well, he's in a very sensitive state of mind. He might not have been thinking about it. But then I was going through more information and I was like, well, he had enough time to think about sitting down and writing out a 3-page letter. He had enough time to, you know, wake himself up in the morning, follow his normal routine, hide his stuff in his room, hide his wallet. He was in his right mind to take things with him. Why didn't he? So that leads us into the theory that he committed suicide. We know he struggled with depression before. We know he struggled with suicidal thoughts. Again, as someone who has struggled with both of those, and being triggered as something as silly as anime, and for me, Target, sometimes you can't control it. It is what it is. It is a mental illness that cannot always be explained. There's never reasons for much of anything, but maybe he had just been repressing everything for a very long time. At least for me, my biggest fear afterwards was always it happening again, because you feel out of control. It's terrifying. He was obviously scared enough to go to his parents because he felt out of control. He felt like he needed help, like it wasn't him. And when you go to a hospital and you are treated for it, you kind of have this hope that you're fixed. And I don't want anyone to take this and, like last time and Rennie's thing, kind of turn mental illness or drugs or anything into like a pissing contest of your experience is the only valid one, because it's not true. We all experience things very, very differently. Maybe he thought he was fixed. Maybe he hoped he was fixed after going to the hospital and after feeling a little bit better. You know, if you've suffered from depression, you know there is a point in time where, like, you know realistically in your brain it's something you might suffer with your entire life, but you hope for some reason that this one thing you're doing or trying will make it go away and it won't come back. And on your good days, you're always like, oh, I'm fine. Like, that's why people stop taking their depression medication. They think they're fine and then all of a sudden they're not. He was scared that it was going to happen again, and he was fine for a while, and maybe it started creeping back up on him. I'm sure he probably repressed his emotions. As we know, he kept everything to himself. He was a very private person, a very reserved person. No one would have known if he was struggling with it again, because no one knew anything before until he had suicidal thoughts. So maybe he was holding so much in, and it just took this one thing that just really made him snap. His one thing that was his escape from his depression and possibly his inner turmoil that he even went and laid out all over 3 pages. His one thing that fixed everything for him, his one thing that made him happy was taken, and that might have been enough to just make him snap. I don't think it's that far out of question. The thing that catches me up on this is, why hasn't he been found if he did? When you kill yourself, you can't go back and hide your own body. You know, it was an area of horrible terrain. I will say that. I mean, cliffs, rocks, you know, rivers, all sorts of things. It wasn't a place where he could just easily be concealed. And they had sniffer dogs. They went past that 1 mile radius that is usually where someone is found. Granted, he could have traveled far out of that. You know, maybe him locking the door and putting the note where he did and hiding things was to buy himself time so he could get further away to do it and not be found. No, he didn't take anything from his home. There wasn't anything from his home that he could have used to kill himself. He literally just walked out by himself. He couldn't have bought anything to kill himself. You know, the most he could have done was just walk into the desert, and at that point he, again, probably would have been found. There is a body of water kind of relatively close. There is a river, but suicide by drowning, while it does happen, it often includes a high level of intoxication, or the person weighs themselves down, because our natural human instinct is to stay alive. It is incredibly hard to kill yourself by drowning. My heart goes out to his family. All of them are on very different pages on what they think happened to him. You know, his mom still thinks he's alive out there somewhere. His dad thinks that he committed suicide and they just haven't found him yet. I hope something comes up soon, but there are so many things pointing to him wanting to have run away before, you know, but I feel like without really reading that letter, we wouldn't know. But even the people that have read that letter still think it's highly likely he didn't commit suicide and he ran away. So I really hope his family gets answers. I know they are desperately searching for him. You guys, exposure is everything, and this is gonna sound silly and it's gonna make me emotional again. Gosh, I'm having such a hard time in this video. The second I read that he watched YouTube, and when I found that out, if he's out there, as a human being, he's going to be curious as to what people are saying about him, what's going on with his family. If he did somehow get access to internet, I obviously don't think he would log onto his Facebook or any social media that he had, because that can be easily traceable. But one thing he could do without being tracked is get on YouTube. If he Googled his name real quick, just out of curiosity, you know, maybe my video would pop up. Maybe my story of relating to him, maybe your stories down below if you're comfortable relating to him. Maybe he'll feel not alone anymore. Mental health is not taken seriously, and this case to me is heartbreaking because he was struggling. A lot of people go through that. A lot of people feel that, and the one thing we usually want is to feel like someone else understands. And maybe if he sees that I've been in the same position, if he sees that some of you guys have been in the same position, and we're okay, and it's okay, you're not alone, maybe that'll be what it takes to come home to his family. I hope he's out there. I really honestly do, and there is such a high possibility that he committed suicide, which is absolutely heartbreaking. But I want to get a message out there to anyone watching this video. This hits home so hard. Bullies and mental illness. Do not be mean to people. Just stop. Just stop. Like, it benefits nobody. It doesn't benefit you whether you laugh about it for 2 seconds. What are you going to be proud of that? 15 years down the road when your own child is being bullied? No, you're not. And these are the kind of things that your simple joke that you think is so funny and impressing your friends, these are the outcomes of that. This is what happens to these people. They spend their life suffering. And these are the options they think they're left with. And so I hope this makes any of you who have bullied someone rethink what you're doing. Have a little bit of compassion. Think about someone else's feelings other than your own. And I hope that this maybe opens up a conversation about mental illness. It's just this case, it's just crazy, and it's touched my heart in a million different ways, and I know we can all learn a bunch from it, and I know we are 120, almost 5,000 strong right now, and you guys all end up watching my video. That is so many people. Imagine if you guys just shared this video or shared his Facebook page on your Facebook just one time. Imagine if you also did it on Twitter, on Snapchat, on Instagram. Do you know how many people his story could go out to? One person might be all it takes. Just one person. For him, if he is out there, to know that we all care about him and love him, and it's fine. Whatever it is, it's fine. I just think we can make a difference, and I hope we make a difference with this video. I'm sorry I got super personal and emotional with you guys, but I feel like there's just been this like lack of connection on my channel, and I did not want to have that with this video, because this video the stakes are too high. You know, there's too much riding on this, and I need you guys to connect with me and stop and think about these cases the way that I feel like we used to, and see all angles and understand it from different perspectives. And if that means I have to share a personal story about myself that relates to someone in this that was hurting as well, then I will do it. Leave a nice comment to him down below. Just something. It doesn't have to be serious. You don't have to, you know, go all out. Just leave something nice down below, whether it's to him, whether it's to his mother or his father or his siblings. Just let's leave something nice and positive today, because sometimes That's all the difference. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. Share everything you possibly can. Please remember all of my sources, period, are always listed down below. That means their Facebook, any of their government-run pages or organization-run pages are all down below. GoFundMe links are usually all down below. So if you want to check any of those out, feel free to do so. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button right here to become a member of the family. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye, guys.